This video is sponsored by HookTheory. How much do I have to practice? Is there any question more universal to learning anything? Whether it's a thing you want to learn for yourself, or learning that's been thrust upon you, you've probably asked yourself, how much do I have to practice? It sounds simple, but it actually raises a number of questions. The first is, how much do you have to practice to what? What are your goals? Do you want to be really good, or just not embarrassingly bad? What does success look like to you? Are you trying to be the absolute best you can be? Or are you just trying to get your teacher or your parents to stop harassing you? Depending on your needs, you might have to practice quite a lot over quite a long time. Or maybe you can get by on a great deal less. Everyone is different, and there are so many different factors that affect talent, skill, and ability. Some of which you can't really change, but others you might be able to work on. Regardless, it can be difficult to find objective truths about these things. Many teachers just say, practice as much as possible, or practice X number of times per week, without really helping the student think through how frequency of practice might affect outcomes. Some people will just trust their teacher and follow their advice, but others may need a bit more convincing. So let's start by looking at how many times you could practice per week and see what feels best for you. First off, you could practice 0 days per week, but I'm sure we can all agree this is the worst choice. Think of all the things you didn't practice this week. Did any of them improve? No? No big surprise there. Things don't tend to improve with zero practice, so we should probably skip right ahead to practicing at least 1 day per week. Now, something is better than nothing, by quite a lot actually. But it can be really hard to make habits stick or even remember what you've learned when you're spacing out your practice sessions so much. In the long term, you're just not racking up that many days, so you'll have to temper your expectations about your progress. But what if you double it to 2 times per week? Maybe you try for a practice session on the weekend and once through the week. It's not spectacular, but it's literally twice as good as once a week. You probably shouldn't expect your progress to be terribly quick, because you're still taking a lot of days off. But if you're achieving your goals, maybe that's enough. If you're not achieving your goals, you might want to bump it up to 3 days a week, which is really pretty decent. Maybe you practice once on the weekend and a couple of times through the week. If you're practicing smart and being efficient with your time, you'll slowly get better. And the ratio of practice days to non-practice days doesn't look so bad anymore. The only problem is you're still spending more days not practicing than practicing. But that all changes if you can just get to 4 days per week. Now you're practicing more days than you're not, and sometimes 2 or 3 days in a row. This is the point where you can count on making steady progress. Of course, 5 days a week is even better. Habits form quickly when you're practicing most days, because you're only taking a couple of days off each week and your practice journal is filled with streaks. You're going to build muscle memory, and all the knowledge and skills you acquire will give you an intuitive understanding of your craft. 6 days of practice a week is fantastic, because you're only taking 1 day off, and you're likely making a conscious decision to not practice on that 1 day for personal or physical reasons. And this can be good because breaks are good for the body and mind. If you're only taking 1 day off a week, you're racking up major practice time, and you'll be sure to reap the rewards. And clearly, if you're able, trying to practice every day is the best way to explore the limits of your abilities. So, broadly speaking, when considering all the options, practicing 1 or 2 times a week is better than nothing, but you can probably expect progress to be slow. 3 days a week is not bad, but 4 or 5 times a week is so much better because you're practicing more days than you're not practicing. And if you want to find out just how good you can be at something, you've got to be practicing close to every day. Given these guidelines, there are 2 things to keep in mind. First, just because you spend time on something doesn't guarantee you'll actually improve, because quality of practice is just as important as quantity, if not more so. You can spend lots of time on something, but not make much progress if you don't practice well. I did a whole separate video about using your time efficiently called How to Get Better by Practicing Less. Be sure to check it out, especially if you feel like you're putting in the time but still not improving. It could be quality of practice rather than quantity. The other thing is, it's worth asking the question, what counts as practice? As a music teacher, I often ask students how many times they're practicing per week on average. And some will surprise me by saying, almost every day, because their progress really doesn't show it. Sometimes it's bad practice habits, but often they'll go on to explain that they have class 3 times a week and 2 rehearsals, so that's 5 times a week. But they never actually take the horn out of the case at home. And come on, that's just inflating numbers on a technicality. It almost reminds me of when Mitch Hedberg said, I like rice. Rice is great when you're hungry and you want to eat 2,000 of something. Now, there's no doubt that any time a musician is spending time doing music, it's a good thing. But just as all musical activities are related and sometimes overlap, each one is also unique and doesn't really substitute for one another. So the only thing that counts as practice is practice. Practice can include many different activities in itself, but fundamentally, to me, The whole point of practice is working on things that you need to work on. And that might be very different from other people you play with. So it's important to have time together and work on ensemble stuff, but also time alone to work on your own areas of weakness. You need to balance practicing as a group and practicing as an individual. And then, when you all return to practice as a group, you're all far stronger. Many other fields are similar to music. Athletes have to do drills with their team, scrimmage, and have real playing experience in games. But they also need to hit the gym, train, and work on that thing they need to get better at. It doesn't matter if it's free throws, forehands, or field goals. If you want to improve a skill, you've got to find time to practice it, maybe hundreds of times. Even skills like learning a language, which is going to require lots of practical, real-life experience speaking with and listening to other people, is also going to progress much faster if you can find time to sit down and work on new vocabulary and phrases, study grammar and sentence structure, and read books and magazines. Multiple avenues of learning can be very beneficial. So feel free to adapt your practice schedule to the needs of your particular craft. But be honest with yourself about what you need to work on and if you're actually spending enough time on it. If your craft happens to be music, you need to look at some of the incredible products from this video's sponsor, HookTheory. Chord Crush teaches you to hear chord progressions by ear using real songs, and their interactive books help you learn and practice music theory. But I think one of their coolest products is called HookPad, which helps songwriters create beautiful chord progressions and melodies even if you don't have much music theory or the ability to chord well on piano or guitar. Songwriting is much more practice-based than most people think. You need to write often and get used to making choices. Every song you write will make you better, and HookPad makes it so much easier. Head to HookTheory.com/Brad Harrison for exclusive discounts on Chord Crush, HookPad, and their music theory books. Thanks so much to HookTheory for sponsoring this video. Now, the other question that's implied by how much should I practice is, how long should a practice session be? Just like how many days a week you should practice, it depends on your age, experience, and goals. Little kids might only have the ability to focus for 10 or 15 minutes, and you can't really expect them to do much more than that. And beginners of any age might have limits that aren't much longer, because new things are hard, and they may be building the physical endurance and mental focus to practice longer. But for most teens and adults, I think a good session length to aim for is about 30 minutes. It's not too long and not too short. It gives you enough time to get your gear and get settled, do a warm-up, run some drills and technique, and dig into whatever the project of the day is. However long your practice session is, it's good to keep in mind that it takes most people a few minutes to warm up so they feel good and sound good, get into the flow of things, and wake up the right part of their brain so they can get good work done. Probably at least 10 minutes or so. In a short practice session, that takes up a decent amount of your time, and that's fine, that's just how it works. But if you can go a little bit longer, you'll probably find the extra time goes further than you might expect. Your total practice time only increases a bit, but your productive time increases faster because your warm-up usually stays about the same. Also, realize that it's important to strike a balance between how long a practice session is and how often you practice. Practicing for 2 hours is great, but it's not ideal if you only do that once a week. It's probably better to break that time into 4 30-minute sessions. You'll build strength, endurance, and habits much faster that way. Finally, some people want to practice but have trouble finding the time. And there's no doubt we're all busy. You may have demands from school, work, family, or friends, or obligations to teams, clubs, or other organizations. The first thing to think about is, be careful about how many obligations you choose to take on. It's easy to say yes to everything, and it's good to try to do a lot of things, to a point, because you have to be careful not to spread yourself too thin. I don't think being constantly stressed and exhausted is the badge of honor some people seem to think it is. No matter what you decide to focus on, keep in mind, if you only practice when you find yourself with nothing else to do, it's just never going to happen. If you really want to find time to practice, make it a priority. Find time in your schedule and slot it in. Treat it like an appointment or homework, because it's not going to happen on its own. And if you happen to be very serious about becoming the best you can be, you might consider all these options to get multiple sessions totaling a few hours each day. That may be unthinkable for some people, but there's just so many different things to practice. And if you're considering making this skill set a part of your career path, a few hours of daily practice is the kind of time commitment that's generally necessary. But for most people who want to improve but aren't necessarily concerned with becoming an absolute world-class elite performer, 30 minutes or so, 3 to 5 times a week is a really decent, achievable goal. Progress might not be obvious within days or even weeks, but the hours really pile up after just a few months. If you've got decent practice habits, you're going to see improvement over time. And regardless of your goals, you want to minimize distractions while practicing, because even small disruptions can really interrupt flow and impede progress, especially when practice time is at a premium. So don't be shy about asking your friends or family to respect your practice time. They'll surely understand if you explain it to them gently, and they'll probably respect your dedication too. Then, put your phone on Do Not Disturb and get to work. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell thing too. And check my channel for lots of videos on practice and music theory. Thanks for watching.